So I just wanted to, Casey, if you want to just flip to that first slide there, I just wanted to take just a minute and just give you a little background, not to give an extensive resume here, but just kind of where I came from and how I got here. I started my whole career after community college in retail store management, and then um, became an interior designer and had my own business for about 15 years. Um, in 2004, I began a career in ministry as the pastor of youth and young adults. Um, and by the time 16 years had passed, I found myself in January of 2020 and felt very called out of the church and into my initial training as a chaplain. And initially, I thought it was just going to be like just a little additional education to help me move to the next step as a pastor, right? And I completed my internship at Nemours Hospital for Children in Wilmington, Delaware, and then found myself in the residency program at Christiana Care right in the middle of the pandemic, August of 2020 to August of 21. So once I completed that residency, it was about that time I realized that I had moved completely out of the church and into chaplaincy. I started as a hospice chaplain, and in September of 2022 began my career here at Beebe Healthcare. And I absolutely loved working in the church. I loved all of that. But chaplaincy for me gave me that real sense of freedom and love for meeting people exactly where they are in the midst of their crisis and helping them to find their hope and their peace, hopefully, from that, right? And so it was kind of like for me, when you get that brand new mattress in the box and it ends up on your doorstep, and once you open up that box, out comes the mattress, you're never going to put it back in the box. And that's exactly how I felt once I discovered that my true calling was really chaplaincy. Can never go back. So, as you all know, in healthcare, our days are often filled with death and dying, crisis, and grief, lots of grief. So we really have to become experts in grief. Now, of course, it's not the first thing that I would have said when somebody asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up, but here I am. And that brings us to our next slide. So I want to just start by speaking the unspoken. And I really feel like as healthcare professionals, we've got to get real and we've got to acknowledge the weight of the grief that we as healthcare workers experience and then attempt to carry each and every day. Um, First, there's your own personal grief that you carry into work with you every single day. So I want to just take a moment here. Just take a moment, just indulge me and take a pause for a moment. Close your eyes if you need to and think about the things that you are personally grieving. Maybe it's death, maybe it's loss, maybe it's missed opportunities, whatever it is. What are you personally grieving right now? And then we meet our patients who are grieving, and we meet their families who are grieving. And I want you to pause for a moment and just allow that one patient, that one family to come into your mind right now. And just acknowledge them. And then we add to that grief the grief of failed systems, right? Whether it's computer, practice, human failure, whatever it is, add that to that list, and we are quickly drowning in grief. And here's the real problem most of it is unacknowledged. And I know the first thing we're going to say is who's got time for such luxuries as expressing our grief? as healthcare workers, there seems to be an unwritten law that we're just supposed to soldier on, right? Suck it up and keep moving. But we're only human after all. And grief is a part of the human experience. It's one we can't deny. We all are going to experience grief on some level, on many different levels, all throughout our whole life. Grief the grief that we experience doesn't go away just because we refuse to acknowledge it. It will live in us and it will fester and it will eventually affect us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. When I enter a room as a chaplain and a patient is suffering, oftentimes with undiagnosed pains, whether it's in the gut, it's in the heart, it's in the back, wherever it is, most often I find as we sit and have our conversations that the real culprit or part of the contributing factor is grief. Grief that they are suffering that they have not acknowledged. And this is as important to acknowledge in your own and address in your own personal life as it is in our patients. So let's begin with attempting to answer the question, what is grief? Next slide. So grief is that deep sense of loss, right, that comes with emotional pain and suffering. And no one gets through life, like I said before, without experiencing grief. And in the healthcare setting, we experience way more than our fair share. So the first quote here is, grief is not a problem to be solved. It is a human response to loss, to change, and to love. Of course, the first thing we think of is the death, right? The death of someone we love. But grief is also experienced in the life changes that our patients and their families and our staff experience. Think about decline in a person's function or their loss of identity. We can think about maybe the things that we can no longer do, the things that we love to do. We retire from a job, for example, that has given us purpose or identity. And I hear that a lot from patients. That's a very deep grief that goes unidentified a lot of times. Then there's the loss of health and independence or hope. I just started a grief group at a local retirement community, and I'm working with the assisted living population, and we're doing this group. And one of the participants, this happened just last week, made this very profound statement. And they're all, this group is a group of people who aren't necessarily grieving death. They said to me, we're in our 80s and 90s, we've dealt with a lot of death in our life. That's not our struggle. Their struggle is their loss of independence. Their struggle is the loss of their homes, that they've had to move from their homes. And so this one gentleman said, our dream and our goal was to find a place to walk when we can't drive. He said, and now I find that if you can't drive, you can't walk either. I thought, wow, that is where they're at. That's a real grief. That's a real loss. And then there's moral distress, burnout, system failure. And all of these are prevalent in our jobs every single day. And sometimes in healthcare, we're confronted with ethical issues that aren't black and white, but they go against our own moral compass, and that causes moral distress. System failure, whether it's staffing, it's shortage, it's lack of supplies, or human error, all of these things lead to burnout. So the final entry that describes grief is love. And without love, there's no grief. My favorite quote by Jamie Anderson is this: grief is love with no place to go. So I think if you talk with anyone who has lost a loved one, and they're going to resonate with that simple statement, The love we feel for others does not die, but left unacknowledged, it's going to bottle up inside of us. It's going to become physically painful, and it can surface in ways that we are not aware or not prepared for. And they can land us in the hospital or worse. Next slide, please. So, how does grief show up in patients and families? I cannot tell you how many times I see patients who are experiencing very real physical symptoms that are undiagnosable or untreatable. I had a patient very recently who was struggling with some back pain, and she had been in the hospital a number of times for it, and they had called me in to see her, and I sat with her. I said, "So tell me what's going on." She said, "What do you want to hear about?" I said, "Whatever's on your heart. I just want to hear what's on your heart." And almost immediately, out came this incredible grief. She had lost two children in a year, two adult children in a year. And as she unloaded her grief, the tears came. And so did the relief. And it just proves that grief lives in our bodies. Um, I asked her at the end, I mean, we spent an hour and a half just sharing and sharing and sharing. And you could see the change on her face. And I know you all have seen that. That relief is real. And I asked her, "How do you feel?" And she said, "You know what? I haven't had any back pain the entire time that I've been talking and sharing." Um, it's pretty amazing. Grief also lives in our emotions, not just in our physical bodies, but in our emotions. I had another patient who, and I think we've all had those patients who are just mean. They're angry. We had a patient not too long ago, a few months ago, I guess, and the staff called me up. They're like, "You need to come up and help this woman." She was just demanding and unsatisfiable. You couldn't do anything to help her. And I sat with her and sat with her and tried to help her. And what broke her was she wanted chips and they forgot the chips. So I went down, I got her a bag of chips, I brought them up, and that was the catalyst to help her relax and to start to share. And guess what came out? Grief. She was struggling with grief, with loss of a loved one. And it changed everything for her to be able to speak about it. Grief speaks also in our inability to focus. So I know patients who have a difficult time comprehending what the doctor is even saying because they're overwhelmed with grief. And we see this a lot of the times in the emergency department when we're called to be there with a family as they're getting this difficult news. And part of my job, I see in that emergency department, is to be that second set of ears to listen and to hear what the doctor's saying so that I can help once he leaves as or she leaves as the patient. I sit with the families to be able to help them understand what the doctor has just said. Um, and I think that that's a really important um, aspect of our job is to be able to help people process through some of those things. And then there's grief that lives in our very soul, and that can zap us of hope and it can render us non-compliant. There is this is a very memorable one for me, and it happened all the way back when I was at Christiana as a uh, resident. There was a lady there who just refused to take her pills. She refused to do any of the things that the doctor had asked her to do. And so this doctor called for a chaplain and said, "Look, I got nothing. You need to go in there and see if you can do something." And again, out comes her grief. She had just lost her son 2 weeks prior and her brother 2 months prior to that. So all that to say is oftentimes in healthcare, what looks like difficult behavior can very often be grief, just asking, begging to be seen and acknowledged. So, next slide. That brings us to the grief that healthcare workers carry. Healthcare workers can personally experience or witness any of the losses that society doesn't recognize as worthy of grief. Um, and when we have situations where society doesn't recognize as worthy of grief, there is no public mourning, there's no words of comfort, there's no opportunities to express how we're feeling. And this leads to an avoidance of the normal grieving process and causes deeper pain and suffering as a result. I'm reading Keith's note. As a human, I have experienced several of these experiences in my own personal life. And as a chaplain, I have uncovered this in patients very often in my practice, but even more so in staff. One example that sticks out to me is we here at Beebe, we're a small community hospital, and everyone knows everyone, right? Or they know someone who does know that person. And when we lose a coworker, it affects everyone in the hospital, whether they know them personally or not, because they know someone who knows them, right? Not to mention that person, that coworker that we lost was a part of the same community that we are a part of, right? And recently, we've experienced over the past year or so different levels of grief acknowledgement from leadership. And that hurts. That has really caused a lot of grief and pain and suffering for our staff. I hear staff expressing the grief for the person that was lost, and they also express that unspoken grief or fear of not being seen by their larger community and missing out on that safety and comfort. And that's a threat. It's threatening, um, their own ability to be seen and to be heard and to be known. And that can cause real grief. We hope to rectify that through a event that we are planning called Walking with Grief. We're hosting an event this June for the entire staff of Beebe Hospital to be able to come and to process and to acknowledge their grief. And a big part of that walk will be a memorial for all of the coworkers that we've lost in the past year. Just an attempt to kind of level that playing field and allow them an opportunity to grieve all of them and to allow them to be acknowledged. Next slide. So accumulated grief, that's something else that we experience as healthcare workers. And accumulated grief is kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. We experience multiple losses in both our personal and our professional life. And with little time to process and no self-care, we can easily see how accumulated grief can overwhelm and cripple us as healthcare workers. Next slide. Compassion fatigue. That is the emotional and physical exhaustion from prolonged exposure to suffering, trauma, and grief. This is really just sensory overload, right? As humans, we can only take so much. As humans, we are that 3 in 1, right? And if we're body, We're mind or our emotions and spirit, just as I said before. And if one of those is off, if one of those is affected, all three will eventually become infected, right? You feel mentally drained. You feel overwhelmed. You feel frustrated. You feel irritated. Um, you feel physically exhausted, right? And then your immune system is compromised. You may experience any number of health issues. Um, you feel spiritually detached, socially isolated. But there is help. You cannot protect yourself from the exposure to grief, but we can find a way through in a healthy way. Next slide. So, what helps? I find the first thing we need to do, and I think I've said it numerous times already, just like AA, we need to acknowledge our grief. It is present in you, and unacknowledged, it will only fester. We know the key to helping others is to be present and to listen. And this is something we were taught in CPE, right? In our first round of CPE, our first unit of CPE. Um, and it was not as easy as it may appear to begin with. Um, for example, I know as chaplains, we are taught to learn to listen to what our patients are saying, but also to what they're not saying. And as I listen to my patients tell their story, I also listen for a feeling. What are they feeling? What does that feel like? And I might respond to their story with, it sounds like that was scary, or it sounds like that made you angry. And 99.9% of the time, they say, yes, it was scary. Yes, I was angry. I am angry. And then I can affirm their feeling and help them to explore that and to process that. In the same way, we need to be able to stop, to be silent, and to listen to our own souls. Take time away to notice and to feel the feeling, whatever it is, whatever we're feeling. Identifying the feeling is the beginning of processing it. And ask yourself that next question: where is this coming from? And if you pay attention, if you wait, if you expect an answer, you will receive one. And it may come in a variety of different ways. It may come as that peace that comes over you. Um, it may conjure up a memory or a situation where you really were experiencing that feeling. Um, it may be just a complete thought in your head. It could be any way, but you'll know it when you know it, and it will help you to begin to process. As healthcare worker, I want to give you permission to feel and to express your emotions. Find your chaplain. I promise you, they will meet you right where you are. Next slide. Self-care. I think as healthcare workers, we're really not good at this, but we really need to begin to make self-care a daily practice, like something that you do every single day. Create those rituals, those routines. I know this is something that I do every single day. As I leave the hospital, no matter what has happened in the day, whether it's good, it's bad, usually it's a mix of it. Usually we're dealing with crisis and we're dealing with grief and we're dealing with trauma and all those things. But in the midst of it, as we enter into that grief, that trauma, that crisis, we do our work. And that's what makes it a good day. So as I'm packing up for the day and I'm getting ready to walk out to my car, I'm reviewing the day. I'm thinking about the day. I'm thinking about the death, the trauma, and I review the good work that was done by all of us, right? From the nurses to the doctors to the chaplains to the EVS workers. I review how each one made a difference collectively. And sometimes, as I'm walking down the hall, heading out the door, I may even say it out loud. It was a good day today. It was a good day. And I thank God that I'm allowed to do the work that I do because I do feel very blessed by that. And then I get into my car, I take off my badge, I hang it in the car. When I arrive home, I put my stuff away, I plug my phone, work phone away and put it on silent. I change my clothes. I'm done for the day. And it was a good day. When we as chaplains have a tough case, we debrief with our coworkers and allow the feelings to come out as we process through. By talking, that's me. That's how I process everything, just to be able to relay it and to talk and to shed a few tears sometimes, but to allow it to be revealed. Grief is real and it demands to be seen. It demands to be acknowledged. And it's okay to cry. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to feel and experience whatever grief conjures up in you. All of it is important. Learning to carry your grief. Next slide. The acknowledgement and the processing of our grief, that is what's eventually going to lead to awareness. And that is, as you move forward, grief is going to move with you. And when you're personally triggered by your patient's grief or a birthday or a reminder of your loss, whatever it is, you're going to be aware of it and you're going to be able to pivot and you're going to be able to step away or lean in and seek some support. The point is, grief becomes a part of who we are. Ideally, it should shape us and allow us to grow and to forge deeper connections, hopefully, with all of those around us, to understand our patients better, to understand our staff, to recognize grief when we see it in a moment. I think it's really important. In the book, Bearing the Unbearable, one of the best grief books I've ever read, Joanna Cacciatore writes about how grief creates compassion. She calls it fierce compassion. And that allows us to connect more deeply to others and to find meaning. She emphasizes that grieving is actually a form of loving. And this is how we find peace in our grief and learn to live with grief and not just try to overcome it. Last slide. We are not meant to carry grief alone. Grief is not meant to be carried alone. It is communal. Withholding our grief, we lose our aliveness, our sense of being a part of a deep and rich web of exchange. That is a quote by Francis Weller. And that brings me to the close.